Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kim Churches, CEO of AAUW. Today, I'm going to be talking about policy versus practice and the continued fight for equality as represented both by AAUW and more broadly the national movements, and really matching up to what that means for today and tomorrow as well, as we're in this exceedingly uncertain time for our nation. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about policy versus practice. We know that about a week ago, on August 18th, we marked the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and that historic vote for a woman's right to vote. But where are we today as we think about that? And what did the 100th anniversary mean to us? And what does it mean in our work at AAUW? And also, where are we in the women's movement today? Are we still in the second wave? Are we in the third or fourth wave of gender equity and the equality movement and the feminist movement? But I would say right out of the gate, it's important to say that a wave is just a way of talking about the different eras of the feminist movement. But a wave also assumes a single unified agenda. And yet, frankly, that's never been the case, as history shows in racial and gender equity and the generational gaps among the feminist movements. As Audre Lorde said, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. Progress never moves forward in a straight line. This nation and our society has lived with centuries of structural racism, of misogyny, and patriarchy. And policies and laws in and of themselves don't solve all of our challenges in the nation. Practice matters too. By every organization, from a small business to schools and higher education, to Fortune 500, to local state government, to nonprofits, right? And yes, to you as an individual. We know that the first wave began with the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. And even with the enormous work done by women of color, leaders like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony made it truly a movement for white women as we move forward to that historic vote in 1920. Congress passed the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote, but definitely not all women. That's why we at AAUW all talk about also the importance of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Our AAUW members over those decades lobbied hard for the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and we should all feel proud of that work. But it's important to note, too, that inside of AAUW, not all branches and affiliates were admitting qualified women of color to membership. In fact, in 1949, AAUW amended our national bylaws to say all college women graduates, regardless of race, regardless of religion, were eligible for membership. That's an important note for us in our history as an organization based and originated in the suffrage movement. And fast forward to today, with gerrymandering, reductions in voting centers, we're seeing voting suppression occur again. Today, some elected leaders are still working to silence people who were and have been historically denied access to the ballot box. We know that in the second wave, many of which our members participated in, we saw a lot of legislative and legal victories. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 theoretically outlawed the gender pay gap. The Civil Rights Act that I just mentioned a moment ago. Landmark Supreme Court cases through the 60s and 70s gave married and unmarried women the right to use birth control. Title IX, protecting all of us from discrimination based on sex in education at every level. And AAUW, again, has played an enormous role, both in getting Title IX passed, but also to ensure it's upheld at a local level, state, regional, and national level. Roe v. Wade, the Violence Against Women Act. But even with all of these victories, practice, in addition to policy, is exceedingly important. So, for example, you would think that with the Equal Pay Act being passed in 1963, that we would be at parity in pay today, male versus a female in the exact same type of role and with the exact same backgrounds. But au contraire, as we all know as AAUW members, the gender wage gap has barely budged, but just a nickel in the past 2 decades. That's why practice is important to complement policy. Well, the suffrage movement became largely about progress for white women, the second wave feminists did definitely care about a wide range of issues, particularly as women realized they had no real economic power. I mean, many of our AAUW members here maybe recall when women couldn't even get a credit card in our own names. And with the civil rights work ongoing in addition to the women's movement, many women of color have felt forced to choose. A good example of this is really of women not all seeing eye to eye are the two sides of the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. You'll recall I interviewed a couple months ago Marjorie Spruill, an AAUW fellow alumna, on one of our earlier Zoom webinars to discuss Mrs. America, the Hulu show, and her 2017 book, Divided We Stand, The Battle Over Women's Rights and Family Values That Polarized American Politics. If you missed it, you can find it taped and available on the AAUW website. And as most of us know here, in January of this year, we were all thrilled and delighted when Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the ERA. But this is important. There's division today as to whether the ERA is the right legislation for the 21st century. There was a recent Pew poll released that said most Americans favor adding the ERA to the U.S. Constitution, even as many do not believe this would make much or any real difference for women's rights. When asked about the impact they think adopting the ERA would have on women's rights in the US, 44% say it would advance women's rights, and 49% said it's not going to make much of a difference. And while more than 8 in 10 Democrats across age groups support adopting the ERA, it's really those age 65 plus that are more likely than those who are younger to express strong support. This really becomes second wave feminists versus third or fourth wave feminists as we strive towards inclusion and equity. As I said, many in the women's movement of the 60s and 70s cared a lot about racism too, but many of the issues didn't resonate in the same ways for Black and Latina women. Black women were accustomed to working outside the home. They had to. It was about economic security. And while Black women and white women both advocated for reproductive freedom, Black women wanted to fight not just for the right to contraception and abortions, but also to stop the forced sterilization of people of color. This is where we get to feminism versus womanism. In the second wave, you really saw the development of the word womanism to match and kind of supersedes feminism. Womanism is the idea of supporting all women, no matter their race or class, not simply focusing on females. And words and grammar matter because they change over time, as we know. It's a dynamic language and a dynamic way that society and culture influences the way we talk and the way we address systemic inequalities. In some ways, you could say that feminism versus womanism is in some ways the beginning of what Kimberly Crenshaw defined as intersectionality in the 1980s and is one of our core AAUW values. While we see Black women working again so hard for equity and equality rights, Native and Latina efforts began as well to address racial and gender inequalities for their communities. But where were the white women as sisters in these efforts? Let's pivot a little closer to today. The movie 9 to 5 came out in 1980. Can you believe it? 40 years ago. The movie highlighted that having the ability and the right to vote was not enough. We need equity in the workplace too. Ostensibly, again, the Equal Pay Act should have ensured equal pay, but we know that's not the case. And perhaps what really makes the film stand the test of time, even as it can be a little cringeworthy to watch, and I realize you are now all humming Dolly Parton's iconic theme song, it's really what makes it a little cringeworthy is just how little has changed in the last 40 years. What were Lily, Dolly, and Jane fighting for in 9 to 5? Ending sexual harassment in the workplace, fair scheduling and flexible hours, equal pay and recognition for equal work. Sound familiar, AAUW members? We're still fighting this fight 40 years after this iconic film. Let's dive in further here. And my remarks here are very well known, but it's pertinent as we move forward here in our work at AAUW and the work that all of you are doing individually, as well as in your local communities at the branch level and regionally and federally. So let's dive in further here as to how our current policies and laws are simply not going far enough to change human behavior and close the gaps for women. It's definitely not just the equal pay gap at all, or the gender pay gap, right? It's about occupational segregation. It's about the leadership gap. It's about sexism, misogyny, and harassment in the workplace. And I've said this before, and I can say it again and again. It really is a Venn diagram of holding women back right from when they're entering the workforce, with this layering effect of all of these issues on top of each other, holding women back from true economic security for themselves and for their families. Yes, women earn more educational degrees at the associate's level, bachelor's level, graduate level, medical degrees, PhDs, etc. We earn more than men across the board, but we still face gaps. For example, according to some of our research, after accounting for a lot of factors like college major, geography, occupation, hours worked, months unemployed since graduation, GPA, etc., there's still a 7% unexplainable gap in the earnings of men and women just 1 year after graduation. We talk about apples to apples. No matter what, women lose. The student loan debt crisis, you all know this very well. We know that women disproportionately hold more of the debt than male colleagues do. Americans right now carry $1.54 trillion in student loan debt. It's more than doubled over the last decade, but women hold 2/3 of that debt, with about $930 billion in the red that they're carrying right now in this exceedingly uncertain economy. While millions of women have loan debt, first-generation college students face even more, and Black women finish their undergraduate education with considerably more debt than white males do. Think about the class of 2020 right now. It's a triple whammy for them. Higher levels of debt, the gender pay gap, and the most atrocious job market we've seen in 9 decades. AAUW members know about the pay gap. You could be reciting these words. You've been advocating for this work at the federal, state, and local level for years and years. We know women working full-time right now are earning 82 cents on the dollar for every $1 earned by a male colleague. We know Black women earn just 62 cents on the dollar, and Latinas 54 cents on the dollar. We know that women are now half of the labor force, and for those millions who work, 2/3 of those women are primary or co-breadwinners, primary breadwinners for their families. And collectively, working women lose out on more than $500 billion a year. But as I said in the beginning of this slide, it is a Venn diagram. It's not just the student loan debt. It's not just the gender wage gap. It's also the leadership gap and the environments in the workplace that are really set up for men to succeed. So let's talk for a second about the leadership gap. In the US today, women are about half of the entry-level workforce, but comprise only 1/5 of the C-suite, and just 7.4% of Fortune 500 CEO seats. This is despite the fact that women earn nearly 60% of bachelor and master's degrees, meaning anybody who thinks there's not a pipeline of qualified applicants is not paying attention to the pipeline. There are plenty of women in the pipeline. But this isn't just in big corporate America. It's also in our nation's nonprofits. It's in our schools, our educational organizations, our governments. And for example, as you think about philanthropy and nonprofits, of the 50 highest paid executives at nonprofits and foundations, only 4 are represented by women. In a 2019 report from Lean In and McKinsey, they found that for every 100 men promoted and hired to a manager position, only 72 women were promoted and hired for the same role. These are continued major obstacles and biases for women in the workplace. And I would be remiss if we didn't talk about sexism and harassment in the workplace. Workplaces were created by men and for men. The systems and paradigms are for men to succeed. Think now about how you become a partner in a law firm or an accounting firm, or make tenure if you're on a tenure track in a university. Unfortunately, all of those roles are also during prime family building years for women. If women typically earn a PhD at around 28 years old and they have essentially 7 years to publish or perish to reach tenure, those are prime family building years, and women are held back. Frankly, a more robust employee handbook or a policy or training program can't compensate for leaders in any sector who consistently ignore or even endorse behaviors such as comments or jokes, discriminating, marginalizing, and excluding women from the conversation. And I say that because words do matter and policies and practices matter, but we have to get beyond just hashtags and into accountability and metrics to create change. Just words in a handbook or in one diversity training or promotion practices training is not going to do it in our nation's workplace. We're already seeing a revolt against the Me Too movement, and we're just 3 years into the work of changing workplace norms. So that's where our AAUW research comes in, aggregating US data through a gender and race lens and the work of so many organizations we work with in coalition around economic security for families. You all know our research work far better really than I do in my 3.5-year tenure here with AAUW. And I can tell you that we'll have some exciting new releases of research in the coming months as well as a completely overhauled and updated Simple Truth that really focuses on total compensation, not just on salary or wages, and doing new cross-sectional analyses on that. You can find more of our AAUW research, as you well know, at www.aauw.org. The first Women's March in January 2017 spurred either the continuation of the third wave of feminism or the beginning of the fourth wave. There's a lot of differences in opinion on which wave we're in. But the movement is driving not just policy changes, but practical needs around #MeToo and the work of Time's Up. I joined AAUW after that first March in January 2017 because I also recognized we needed clarity to a gender agenda. It seems that there was an amalgamation of so many different issues talked about that day, but not a clear agenda and roadmap as to where we were going. What do we need to achieve equity and equality in red, blue, and purple states? Is this for our economy? How can we be passionate, progressive advocates, but also take a pragmatic approach in education, with employers, and with society? So we're still in that work right now, and with our 2018 strategic plan now going into a 2.0 version. As you know, our strategic plan is meant to be a dynamic living edition, and you'll see more of that this fall as the national board and national staff put forward new ideas to really make sure we're honing in on where we are as a nation and what we at AAUW, where we can play leading roles in our core buckets of areas of focus. 1992 was called the Year of the Woman after 24 women won seats in the House of Representatives and 3 more won seats in the Senate. But it was barely a blip, as the number of women entering national politics frankly plateaued right after 1992. In January of 2019, at the State of the Union, I was invited by a congresswoman out of Florida to be her guest for that evening, and I was thrilled to be joined with so many sisters all in white. A record 117 women won in the 2018 election, gaining back the House of Representatives for the Democrats. But was the 2018 election the second year of the woman? And is it living up to its name? Women remain far from having equal representation in Congress. So we know we saw these record 117 women win in 2018, but think about that right now in the 116th Congress, about 1 in 5 members are women, but women constitute over 50% of the US population and half the labor force. So we assuredly have a long, long way to go to truly being at the Year of the Woman. What we're witnessing today, and we've talked a lot about this with you all in webinars, at the branch level, and state conventions virtually, since this truly unfortunate and terrifying pandemic we all began experiencing back in March of this year. What we're witnessing is how the coronavirus is amplifying and exacerbating all of our nation's inequities and putting them right smack dab in our faces. The issues AAUW members have long been fighting for are now alarmingly urgent, and our efforts are needed now more than ever. This crisis is different in so many ways from 2008, 2009, and the financial crisis then. So consider this. Close to 30% of working Americans have no sick leave and have to choose between a paycheck and potentially losing their job or risking exposure to infection. Women comprise more than 70% of the healthcare industry, including more than 85% of nurses. We're on the front lines. We're putting ourselves and our families at risk to care for others. Women are the majority of low-wage workers. We're the majorities of part-time workers in this nation with little to no benefits. Can you even imagine, once we get past this pandemic, not talking about the critical need for paid sick leave for all human beings in the workforce, all individuals in the workforce? After this, you can't imagine that. This has exemplified and amplified the needs for leave changes right now. About 70% of our working population, just like myself and my colleagues at AAUW, are gratefully able to work from home safely in our own environments. But teleworking holds a true gender divide, and many of you have forwarded articles to me about this or have witnessed it in our own families. Mothers are twice as likely as fathers to have been negatively impacted at work by the pandemic, trying to be 100% at their jobs, 100% as spouses or partners, 100% as mothers, and 100% of homemakers as well. The divide is real. The pressure on women, the anxiety, the fear, the guilt, the worry, these are real issues impacting so many working women today, right now. In a recent Bonnier survey, 81% of working women, working moms, said they've been impacted negatively versus just 41% of working dads. And women have been certainly impacted much more greatly economically too, with more layoffs, more furloughs than we saw in the 2008-2009 crisis. We must value all women's work. And this is why when I say this pandemic is shining a spotlight on the issues we've all known about and that we've been working on at AAUW, it also means we have a real opportunity for practical change, for policy change and moving this nation forward towards gender equity. We know that Black Lives Matter started long before the 2017 Women's March, and we know racial justice must be firmly ingrained in our AAUW equity work. The nation right now may be finally at a time where we can actually get to national reckoning and fighting for justice for those we've lost so incredibly tragically. A lot of that is due, in fact, as well, to the COVID-19 pandemic, because it is all in our faces right now as we're watching these horrors play out. Thinking about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, and so many others. Just this week, Jacob Blake is fighting for his life right now. We fight, too, to eradicate hundreds of years of structural racism in our nation. And so many organizations, companies, associations are evaluating their own practices and work to begin doing deep, lasting, meaningful work. Again, moving away from platitudes and hashtags into meaningful change so that we can recognize the injustices and inequities that we've been living in our society for far too long. As a 139-year-old organization, we at AAUW, every one of us, must be keenly aware that we too have a lot of work to do when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That includes you as members of AAUW too. We have work to do because the average age of our members is 72 years old and white. Many identify as second-wave feminists, and we need to make sure we are listening, learning individually, and definitely collectively together in discussion groups to meet the needs today. Not just yesterday's needs, but really ensuring we are addressing what's happening in our nation and in our communities today and tomorrow. It is on all of us to root out systemic racism, to ask critical questions about racial and gender equity in every sector of our society, and taking action today and tomorrow. So, what does that mean? What can you do? What can I do? First off, I want you to continue to look in the mirror. Admit, address, and combat your own biases based on your own upbringing and experiences. If you are not taking the implicit bias test twice or 3 times a year, I urge you to do it. Take it again today after this webinar. Visit implicit women.harvard.edu. Stop using phrases like a man or like a girl or men are the bosses while women are just bossy. Think about how we are framing things or looking at individuals. Think back to when we first saw the Democratic Party put forward candidates prospectively for the candidate for president. And as we looked at these prospective Democratic candidates versus the Republican options, we originally saw a cast of characters that were male, female, of a lot of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, age demographics, geography, etc. And where we ended up is a lot of, because of as we think about this historic vote in November, is a lot of these biases of what we think a leader should look like and be like. And so I urge you to really make sure you're taking that test on a regular basis. I would also say, and I know many of you are doing this, read, listen, engage, repeat. It's like when you're putting something in the washing machine and you rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. We must do that hard work as well. Recently, Julia Brown and Melinda Gall, your board chair and vice chair, named a new racial equity and justice working group. That's a national effort made up of national board members as well as member leaders and former national board members. And your national elected board of directors right now is doing some reading, listening, and watching, meaning they're all reading the same book right now, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. They're listening to podcasts. They're watching TED Talks. They're watching 13th, the documentary about the 13th Amendment on Netflix right now. And then they're going to be sharing conversation about how this impacts them and how it applies to our work at AAUW today and tomorrow. Likewise, our national committee, the Inclusion and Equity Committee, is putting forward a new toolkit that will be released this fall to members, branches, and state affiliates, as well as at the national level, to ensure we are living up to our values of intersectionality, diversity, and inclusion in all of our work of a vision for equity for all. So I urge you to do your own reading, to really make sure you're listening, watching, and doing your own work, as well as at your branch or community level too. Also ask yourself, are you a bystander or an upstander? A bystander watches things that are maybe uncomfortable, and an upstander stands up and says, John, that was an inappropriate comment to make about Susan, or that's inappropriate profiling, or ensuring that you're joining. For example, this Friday is a massive national march on the anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous march here in Washington, D.C. We're expecting over 100,000 humans. My daughter and I will be out there this Friday, and allowing us to be shoulder to shoulder to ensure we're all moving forward towards racial justice. Play the part you can in every single way to be more of an upstander than a bystander. Use and demand sunshine, meaning transparency. When things are opaque, people can get away with a lot. When we demand sunshine and really looking with clear eyes, we can know where we are and how much further we need to go to get to true parity and equity in every regard, gender-wise, racially, etc. And that might mean tracking and making public continued progress or lack of progress at your branch level, affiliate level, calling out your local governments to see how they're doing, both with elected officials as well as appointed. It might be looking at your own school board in your community to see if it's actually representative of our demography in your community or nationally today. We need to demand more on search committees. This may be more important to those of you who are in the workforce right now, but so often we see search committees are checking a box and having very diverse candidates with stellar backgrounds, but still inadvertently choosing or very blatantly choosing a white man named John for the job. We have to demand more of search committees in every single role as we think about hiring, promotion, and retention practices in the workplace if we're going to continue to build on the pipeline. It can't just be about passing kind of an Equal Pay Act 2.0, as much as we're going to continue to advocate for the Paycheck Fairness Act and so many other laws that must be updated from the waves of the 60s and 70s of the extraordinary laws we got onto the books, thanks to so many AAUW members advocating for them. But in addition, we have to work on our practices in the workplace too. I know you all know this, but continue to be a grassroots advocate. This election on November 3rd matters. These are our values. We are fiercely nonpartisan, but we are not values neutral. We believe our society is better when we are moving forward with gender equity, when we are bolstering racial equity in our work to ensure justice and fair and equal opportunities. And frankly, vote. Vote in your national election, but I also urge you to vote in the AAUW election this year. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about the educational requirement for AAUW membership that is currently on the books, and one that we have talked about many, many times, both in my tenure here at AAUW, in the 2017 annual vote, as well as the 2018 annual vote, as well as for many years prior to. So let's talk a little bit about what AAUW must address here. As a membership organization, AAUW depends on our ability to attract and retain new members. To continue to grow and thrive, we must be responsive to changes in our demographies and include individuals with diverse backgrounds and perspectives to ensure we're meeting society's needs today. Our current policy that you must hold an educational degree to be a member is frankly at odds with our efforts at inclusion and equity, and is counterproductive to recruiting members of diverse race and ethnicities, as well as younger members. Something I hear constantly from members and branches and state affiliates around the country is, how can we get younger members? How can we get younger members? We can't keep expecting new results from old behaviors. We must change the way we work and the way we think. Younger feminists, it's not simply that we just can't recruit them, it's that they do care about our mission, they do care about inclusion and equity, but they do not want to be affiliated with an organization that claims to be feminist, but is frankly exclusionary. I've talked about this so much in member webinars, in state conventions, etc. And you know that I held focus groups around the country with men, women, and non-binary individuals around the country in several cities that were ages 21 to 40, which frankly led to the Equity Network development, because those groups didn't want to become members of an organization that was exclusionary in any way. And they also don't look at membership in the same way that we did when we joined AAUW in the 20th century. AAUW's mission makes it a great prospective partner for corporations and foundations, but those same corporations and foundations have a lot of policies and practices in place that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that means with the partners with whom they collaborate as well. We do not currently meet the basic inclusion language required for many of these funders. So we get X'd out right out of the gate, and as a consequence are prospectively losing out on dollars that could help us move forward with our mission and vision. And it actually puts a bigger burden on our members to contribute to AAUW. Now, sometimes members tell me that our educational requirement is what makes AAUW distinct in a crowded gender equity space. No, my friends, that is not true. It's exclusionary in a time where women make up the majority of degree holders in this nation. Where is AAUW actually unique? It's in the vast breadth of equity work we address. There are a lot of organizations that address some, many, most even, but not all in the ways that we do with our mission goals and issues. It's highly doubtful if we were to eradicate and remove the educational requirement with a 2/3 vote in our bylaws next spring. It's highly doubtful we'll gain more members in this if we drop the degree requirement. We never did substantially increase our membership when we allowed men to join in 1987, and there was a vast debate and worry that men would take over AAUW. Men make up less than 2% of our membership totals today. Or when we changed the degree requirement to an associate's degree or equivalent in 2005. The reason we should drop the educational requirement is simply because it is time, because it is the right thing to do, and it is in keeping with our mission to serve all women and girls. We are an organization that works to advance equity, yet we do not see non-degreed women as equal to us at all. A college degree will not and cannot make us all like-minded. That is another comment I get many times from members who still believe in the educational requirement, that they believe somehow they're going to have tighter affinities and tighter conversations because all of the women share a degree. There are plenty of people with college degrees in my own family, in fact, that think and behave differently from one another. And would we not want Lilly Ledbetter or Eleanor Roosevelt to actually be able to apply for membership and not just an honorary one? AAUW supports the potential of all women. We know well how many sacrifices our members have made over the decades to obtain their degrees. I did too, okay? I was a first generation. Neither of my parents graduated from college. And because of all of our hard work, many more today pursue higher education than in our time, which is fantastic. Today, as I said, women make up about 60% of undergraduate degrees. We've won that battle, friends. If a woman chooses to go on into higher education, that's terrific, and AAUW will be there to support them for all women. Those who have degrees can be proud of their hard work and reaching their goal. But working with women without degrees does not demean nor dishonor your accomplishment in any way, shape, or form. It's high time we move forward with conviction to eliminate this dated requirement to membership. You're going to be hearing more and more about this from Julia Brown and your national board members, as well as member leaders around the country who will be working towards a membership vote next spring. Now, I started my remarks today by saying it was policy versus practice. That's wrong. It's policy and practice, as we all know. Laws and policies alone can't do it. We have to flip the paradigms. We must get out of this old Rockwellian or even an old Ozzie and Harriet skit to turn the page and ensure our society, our educational systems, and our workplaces meet our demography where it is today, meet our societal needs today, and abolish the inequities that we have faced for far, far too long. We must do the hard and necessary work on racial and gender equity. No more turning our heads and ignoring that which is so painfully apparent and right in front of us. Put it out there in the sunshine and demand change. But change starts with every single one of us, in our homes, at our kitchen tables, as we vote, as we continue to be lifelong learners, willing to change, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our houses of worship, and yes, in all of society. As your CEO, an organization with roots in suffrage, I welcome difficult conversation and listening to others' experiences so we can do better, so we can march forward. Some days are going to be baby steps, maybe even only an inch to propel us forward, but forward we must go. If COVID has taught us anything, it's taught us that we can change behaviors. We can do hard work, starting with you right now. Thank you, AAUW. Thank you to all of our incredible members, and let's get back to work. So with that, my friends, I will stop sharing my screen, and I will move into the Q&A to answer as many questions as I can. Let's see here. There's a question here from Jan Carey about the same arguments with the degree requirement can be applied to STEM versus STEAM. STEM, of course, is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEAM, as in the A for the arts. Actually, because women are so very well represented in the arts, we are continuing our work thanks to a grant through a bequest from Nancy Grace Roman. We are continuing our work on STEM because, frankly, we're flatlining in some areas as you disaggregate areas of STEM to truly ensure that we're moving forward and moving and encouraging women to at least acknowledge and look at STEM careers and see if they want to pursue those educational and career opportunities. So we will continue to be working towards STEM just because we are, as women, disproportionately in the arts, social sciences, and frankly in lower paying roles within STEM rather than the higher paying roles and promotion practices. Let me just see here what else we have. How do we address this at the local level? What are some ideas from you and the others viewing? That's from Linda. Thanks for that question. You are, as I've said, going to be getting more materials on this for the member vote from the board and from the working groups. You're also going to be seeing, as we think about bolstering and working towards bolstering racial equity and justice in our work, you can simply develop your same sort of reading, listening, and watching group. There are a lot of resources available out there because our membership, again, is overwhelmingly white and older women. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that we are representative not only in our membership, but actually are becoming more progressive in our thinking, our learning, and our listening. And so that can start with you individually. That can start with a simple program that you might do, or a book club where you change the focus of your book club to really be bolstering racial and gender equity and justice in this coming fall. But we will be, as we are working towards the vote next spring on the educational requirement for membership, you will see a lot of tools and a lot of counterpoints because this has become a Hatfield and McCoy situation for us at AAUW over the years. And we do require, based on our bylaws, a 2/3 member vote in our quorum to overturn that educational requirement. The closest we've gotten to is, I think, about 48% or 49%. So we haven't reached that 2/3 threshold that's needed for it. I can't do it myself. I cannot do it myself. Now, Carol has asked, and I've answered this many times before, but would our name change? I'm going to say this loudly and clearly again. AAUW right now is not representative of all we do. The first A stands for American. We have been working internationally for more than 100 years, so American is already incorrect. Association. Our membership dues only cover anywhere from 15 to 20% of our total revenues on our budget. So again, that's a misnomer. We're not just an association. The W for women. We admitted men back in the 1980s, and we do programming for men, women, and non-binary people. So again, that is outdated. And the U has been outdated since 2005 because we admitted associate's degrees. We use the acronym AAUW as a pivot to our past, but we've also had more than one name in our history. Yes, there is an opportunity to think about a name change, but that's a whole other issue that requires a lot of money, branding, research to ensure that we're moving forward. You will find, if you go on our website, that you see the words equity now right out front. That's something my daughter coined when I first started at AAUW, and it kind of stuck with all of us. So do understand that just removing the educational requirement is not the sole letter in our acronym that is woefully out of date. All 4 letters AAUW are out of date. Let me see here what else we have in here. Oh my goodness. Somebody anonymous said, if 60% of women have graduate degrees, why do we need women who don't have degrees? I'm struggling with answering that, in that we are supposed to be an organization that is helping all women and girls succeed in education, in training for better jobs, in getting into our economy, into leadership roles, and ensuring that we can retire in a way. So it's not a matter of need. This is about fulfilling our actual mission and vision. So we do need to be representative of where the needs are for women today. Yes, our roots were ensuring that women could gain access to higher education. But again, as an organization with those roots, we also have to be mindful of where we are today and what the needs are truly of women and girls today. And the other thing I will say is we will be giving out fellowships and grants, and will be deeply, deeply motivated in educational for eternity. Our endowment will assure that. We give away more than $4.5 million a year in graduate and doctoral fellowships and grants. So that will continue. But we do need to ensure, if we're going to be relevant to today, that we are serving the needs of women and girls today. And that includes women and girls who are not pursuing higher education education degrees, because the reality is manufacturing still is an incredibly viable and important service. Work is incredibly viable. All of you are being taken care of, what are now known as essential workers, because they've been feeding you during this pandemic. They've been delivering you food. They've been ensuring that you are safe and that your health is cared for. And so I think we need to be mindful of our own roots here and make sure that we are thinking about our mission and vision first, not just who serves us. Let me see here if I can get to any other. Yeah, there's a question here. What have we done specifically in racial equity and justice? Again, we are reworking. We had already put into our strategic plan a lot of objectives around women of color, as well as you can see just even in the Simple Truth edition from last year, how we've disaggregated not just by geography and type of occupation and the like, but also through race and ethnicity. And you also, if you're paying attention to our webinars, I hope take a look on the membership page and view some of the extraordinary conversations we've been having around how to and how to have difficult and important conversations to be addressing your own biases and getting to real change in our society at an individual level, a community level, and a national level. So we are in that work right now all together, but I will say it's not going to be one where we're going to be done anytime. This is lifelong work for every one of us. This is not work that we say, terrific, AAUW is racism free. Terrific, AAUW has achieved all of its objectives in racial equity and justice. This is hard work that will go on for forever because we've been living in structural racist society for more than 400 years. Let's see here. Let me see what other questions we have in here. Oh, what do you recommend for Marie? What do you recommend for changing the at-home landscape to level the playing field? I mean, look, it's holding parents accountable here too, and not allowing. We women have been raised in societies where we're meant to be everything. Think of all the jokes here that we can fry up the bacon, put it in a pan, all of the old commercials from the 60s and 70s, all the way to today of working women right now. So to level that playing field, friends, is going to take a long time. And we also still have biases as we think about stay-at-home dads or stay-at-home partners when it's not women. I too faced just awful harassment from folks, women included, when I chose not to take my 3 months of leave, and my husband, when we adopted our daughter, took the leave and not me. He was treated like a king and I was treated like a pariah, even though this idea that we should be shared in the responsibility is very much a part of the choices of the second wave and third and fourth wave of feminism. So to level those, it's about the partners we choose and holding everyone accountable. I'm very lucky that my husband, Adil, loves to do dishes, loves to iron, loves to do the laundry. He's an extraordinary stepfather to my daughter and really sees that I'm in a different type of role in the workforce than he is. So we actually, he does more of the housemaking and homekeeping duties than I do. But I think so much of that is going to be very much on an individual level and really supporting people who make choices that were different from yours. I mentioned books and videos all board members are watching. This is just a short assignment that board members are doing right now for the next month. But if you just go into Google, my friends, this is so easy. Put in, what are resources for white people to read, listen, and watch in dealing with racial inequities. And you will get litanies and litanies and litanies of prospective shows, of documentaries, of TED Talks, of podcasts, and of books. The book that the board is reading right now, I will type it in here for you. It is Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. I read it earlier and highly recommend it. I just now personally just started the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, another fine book, but there are many, many, many. There are terrific podcasts available. And yes, we will have a reading list that will be included in the Inclusion and Equity Committee's toolkit as well. But all of you have phones like this, or an iPad, or a desktop, or a laptop, and you too can just go and visit Dr. Google and put in a simple search to find some reading, some listening, some watching, so you can help to self-educate or to choose something interesting, a long form essay in the Atlantic, for example, that you might read together with fellow members, or in your branch. Let's see here. I don't have current diversity numbers for our AAUW membership, but what I can tell you is exactly what I said before, that the vast majority are white women about the age of 72. We have as I said before, we have very limited males within our membership, a little less than 2%, and our racial and ethnic numbers are very, very poor. What I can say in our equity network effort, which is really for 21 to 40-year-olds in the workforce right now, women, men, and non-binary people who, through our focus groups, learned they really did want to sit with men and non-binary people too, not just have a group talking about equity only in a binary way for women. Those groups are exceedingly more diverse, both in background, geography, and in race and ethnicity. So we will be moving forward there too. There's a question here again about what we can do to bolster this movement to be inclusive of non-degree holders. You hold the power, my friends. All of you hold the power. Excuse me, I need a little water after all of these words. You have the power to make this change. Everything I've said today is being recorded and will be placed on the website. Furthermore, you will see Julia Brown, Melinda Gall, and our board leaders will be speaking out much more vociferously over the coming months about the educational requirement and the need for us to vote to eradicate. But let me be clear, I am but one vote. Each of your national board members are but one vote each. So this is going to come from all of you. And this is not all going to be handled by headquarters, because it cannot be. We cannot change the bylaws without all of your help. You've heard what I've had to say today. You saw the slide as well. We have put out other materials in 2017, 2018, and there will be materials distributed as well in newsletters and in Zoom remarks to come over the coming months. But you hold the power in this to make sure. That's how our organization is structured. We are a democracy, and together we will vote. But I get but one vote, as do you. And so all of us as individuals, just as we're trying to get out the vote in November in our national election, we too need to do so for the organization we love in AAUW next spring. Let's see here. I think that is about it. There's a question about the toolkit. The Inclusion and Equity Toolkit. This is going to be a source of resources, glossaries and terms, et cetera, et cetera. It is not going to be released in the spring. It will be released this fall. You can expect it October, November-ish. It is being refined right now. This will not be something that's like War and Peace. These are going to be practical tools in an accessible way for you on the website that we will make sure to market heavily. And also I would say the Inclusion and Equity Committee is working really closely with the Advancement Committee now and the board, because inclusion and equity needs to be in every part of our organization, every part of our mission, whether it's you as an individual member at your branch level or the efforts of the total national organization. This is something we must do. Let's see here. I also would say, about the age of our average member. I know a lot of people are shocked by that. And when I'm in a room with you, then I say, look around. And they look around and go, oh yeah, I guess that's right. We are an older organization. I'll also say, many of you say, Kim, what are you all doing at National? You need to put together better marketing brochures to recruit younger members. And yet, when I ask individual members if their own daughters, nieces, or neighbors that are younger than them join, they say no. Or that they gifted them a membership and it lasted just for the term of the gift and they didn't renew. Or if they did renew, they renewed for 1 year and then never renewed again. Friends, membership organizations are changing. That is why we too must ensure we are relevant to today. If we stay in what worked in the 20th century, you're going to see numbers continue to decline. That's why we have to meet people where they are. I say this so often, and I can't reiterate it enough. We live in a society that lives by the golden rule when we need to be living by the platinum rule. We all know what the golden rule is, right? But the platinum rule is treating people not the way that you wish to be treated, because the way Kim Churches wishes to be treated is different than the way you wish to be treated, right? We have to be treating people the way that they wish to be treated. We have to listen more and stop talking at them. We really have to engage people where they are. And frankly speaking, younger people are not joining because a lot of our systems are set up for women in retirement years that have the time to work in this ways. And that's fantastic. And the work that we're doing with membership is foundational and is not going to change. I can assure you of that. M for membership is remaining. That is not going away. But if we're going to be relevant to what the needs of our society are today, we have to make sure that we're offering other options underneath the umbrella of AAUW for more people of different experiences, different backgrounds, and different ages. Because honestly, I'm 50 years old, and I know that for baby boomers and for Gen X, we kind of stopped after, in a lot of ways, with getting a lot of progressive things passed. We were so excited after all that happened in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And not a lot of progress has really catapulted forward. We see those leadership numbers really flat. We see the gender wage gap really flat. But as I'm looking and feeling hopeful, I look to the millennials and Generation Z. And they frankly are fed up, and they're not going to put up with a society that's not inclusive and equitable in every regard, in education, in the workplace, and in society. And if we want to engage millennials, who, by the way, my friends, are no longer in college, they're now age 39 and 40, and we want to engage Generation Z and post-Generation Z, we have to apply the Platinum Rule and meet them where they are, not treat them the way we've been treating ourselves and our friends. And with that, I am going to pause there and say thank you so much for joining me today. As I promised, this will be taped and available on our AAUW membership page for use later on. And you'll be hearing so much more from your elected leaders on the national board. From me here, Kim Churches in Washington, D.C., in my home here, I thank you for joining us today and look forward to seeing you on a future Zoom webinar. Thanks so much.